This is Bill Bodong, and he was a gunner on a torpedo bomber. All right. Do you remember where you were or what you were doing when you heard Pearl Harbor had been attacked? What were your feelings when you heard about it?
I was 15 years old. I was at the skating ring at 4th Avenue when they bombed Pearl Harbor. And I was a paper carrier. And they called out that all the paper carriers had to report to their stations to deliver the paper with the news of the bombing.
Okay. And how did you feel about that?
Upset. Because I'm 15 years old and I thought if this goes on long, I'm going to get in it. And by golly, I ended up.
All right. And so you enlisted, correct?
Yes.
And
I joined at 17 years old. My dad had to sign to get me in.
Okay. And was there a specific reason that you wanted to enlist?
My brother had gotten killed. He was a Marine. And right after he got killed, I wanted to go in the service. My mother was dead against it, but my dad signed me in anyway.
How old was your brother?
8 years older than me. 25 maybe.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Had a little girl.
When you found out you were going to be on a naval base in Florida, how did you feel?
I was thrilled to death because they weren't going to put me on an aircraft carrier and send me out to sea. Because I was a lousy sailor. I got sick. When I was in Great Lakes, they put us out on the lake out there, and I threw up for 2 days. So I wasn't a good sailor.
Then yeah, I'd say that was some good news.
No, not a good sailor.
And what were your first thoughts upon arriving at the naval base?
I was overwhelmed because how big it was and all the airplanes. And I didn't know what they were going to do with me. Because at that time I had just gotten out of Great Lakes and they shipped a bunch of people different places. And they sent me to Jacksonville, and I didn't know what I was going to do there. And when I pulled in, they assigned us barracks, and then an officer came through and said, "You're going to gunnery school, you're going to gunnery school, you're going on a ship." And every third one went to a ship, never two went to gunnery school. I was lucky, I went to gunnery school.
Yeah. Okay, so what were your duties when working as a gunner on a torpedo bomber?
Well, I was supposed to be helping navigate. I was the radio man, and I watched out for the enemy airplanes, supposedly. Of course, I never seen any because I didn't get in combat. But in training, they would fly you along, and then they'd pull these behind another airplane called a sack. And if you saw that sack, then you'd raise your guns up and try to put as many bullets in that sack as you possibly could.
Okay.
That was part of the training.
And you were never in combat?
No. Nope. Just when we were getting ready to go to combat, the war was over.
Yeah.
Thank heaven.
Yeah. Explain what the atmosphere or environment was like on the naval base.
Before the war ended, it was real hectic. I mean, training was really tough. They were training you to go over and face the Japanese. And, it was really tough. I mean, you got up at 5 o'clock in the morning, you didn't get to bed till 10, 11 o'clock at night.
Mm-hmm.
And after the war was over, really different. It was really relaxed. You could do anything you wanted to. Nobody cared. Everybody was interested in getting out of the service.
Yeah, I bet.
But they kept me another year.
They kept you another year to do what exactly?
That's when they assigned me. I ended up at a naval air station in Florida, Opelika Naval Air Station. And they put me in the engineering department. And that's where I got the ideal that that's what I wanted to do in life.
Gotcha. What kind of engineer were you?
Here,
Mm-hmm.
Mechanical.
Mechanical. All right. Let's see. While you were in Florida, what was your biggest fear?
Getting eaten by an alligator. Because when my wife and I, we lived down in a little house, or little apartment area, and it was 2.5 miles away from the Florida Everglades. And every time they would have a fire in the Everglades, which was probably once every month, the alligators and the snakes would crawl over to our complex. And you had a little window right next to your door, and outside of the door there was a little concrete stoop. And you kept a stick right outside that window because you didn't open that door until you opened the window and looked out and made sure there wasn't a gator or a snake sitting on that stoop. And 9 times out of 10 there would be. And you take your big stick and knock them off. Remember, Grandma used to drop her nuts. She'd say, "Open that damn window and see if there's a snake out there." It was funny. We had a lot of fun after the war was over. Grandma came down and you know, we were married. She came down and lived with me.
Oh, she did?
Yeah, lived on right off the base.
So she didn't live with you when you were actually in training?
No.
Did you live on the base?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I lived on the base during that time. And then when they got this new housing project finished down there out at Opelika Naval Air Station, well, I signed up for it. And as soon as it became available, I came home and picked Grandma up and brought her back down with me. And we stayed down there for another 8 or 9 months before I got out.
Mm-hmm. How long were you there without her before?
About 1.5 years. Off and on different places.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. So what was it like when you found out that the war was over and you were going to get to come home?
Well, I was thrilled when the war was over, but when they told me I wasn't going to get to come home for another 8 or 10 months, I was really upset because I signed up for the duration. Well, the way you did it those days, you signed up for the duration and 6 months. Well, the 6 months came around, and I was still there. So I was upset.
Yeah, I'd say so.
I wasn't the only one.
How has World War II changed your outlook on life?
Well, it gave me a career. It got me into engineering, which I would have probably never done and would have come home. Because I had no idea. You know, I was 17 years old when I went in the Navy. I had no idea what I was going to do with my life.
Yeah.
So it gave me something to look forward to, and it trained me.
Mm-hmm.
And when I came home, that's when I got into what I was doing, and that's all I did from then on.
Yeah. How old were you whenever you got out?
19.
19.
Yeah, I'd say 19. Because I was 20 when your mother was, when your grandmother was born.
20?
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything that you would have done differently?
Probably not. Because back in those days, when you're 17 years old, you're indestructible.
Oh, yeah.
And you can whip the world. And then you find out when you get to be 20 years old, you know, the world's going to whip you.
And so how do you feel generally about that war?
About the war?
Mm-hmm.
Well, they said it was a war to end all wars. And if we wouldn't have won the war, we would be all speaking Japanese or German. Right now, yeah. I think everybody's feeling was the same way. Everybody, because 90% of the people who went into the service joined. They didn't get drafted, they joined.
Mm-hmm.
Because they wanted to go fight for freedom. Yeah. That's how I felt about it.
Yeah.
You know, of course, I had a grudge against the Japanese because they killed my brother. But
Yeah. Where was he at whenever
Iwo Jima,
he was what?
a Marine.
Oh, okay. Before you went in.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. Alrighty. Well, thank you for letting me interview you.
Oh, you're all right. Let me borrow your pen and pencil when I do with your paper.